So without a doubt, the Line 6 Helix Stadium was the most hyped guitar product of 2025 into 2026, just judging by the number of reviews alone.
Looks to me like you got swept up in that hype.
Well, that's kind of true. I really wanted it here, but I've been using it solidly for 60 days and have reserved judgment until now. Hey there, I'm Dan, the self-proclaimed Lonely Rocker. Thank you so much for joining me today. So it is all about Line 6 Helix Stadium XL today. But before we get to the festivities, I have to welcome, once again, my good friend in the cheap seats. Dude, you're the only one here. What's with the obstructed view seating?
Well, the way I see it, I don't have to look at your face.
Well, I don't need to look at your face either.
Anyway, so the Helix Stadium XL has been a fixture here for the last 60 days. I've been using it exclusively. And as you see, this being a recording studio, I'm not a live player. I predominantly work here in my studio. And it's not just recording amp models and how the tones off the Helix sound like. To me, it's incorporating all sorts of different sources in search of the perfect tone.
There is no tone either good or bad, but tweaking makes it so.
That looks like another expensive toy to me.
Now, I don't like to think in terms of cheap or expensive. For me, it's about value. So I'm going to show you my process. I'm going to show you some sounds. And at the end, I'm going to let you know my thoughts about all of that, including value, which is very important to me. The Helix Stadium, of course, is a guitar amp modeler designed for live applications with this floor form factor. But if you are a live player or you're looking to set up a home recording setup, it's definitely worth considering because I converted to guitar amp modelers as my principal audio interface a couple of years ago, and I find it a better alternative to a lot of standard audio interfaces, especially if you're recording guitar and bass and things like that, because it gives you all of the amp modeler features contained within your audio interface. To ensure this video was truly genuine, I've been using the Helix Stadium XL as my main audio interface exclusively for the past couple of months, assuming the role previously held by my Fractal FM9 Turbo. It took over all the functions and then some. Setup on Mac is super simple. It connects to the computer via the USB-C port. On Mac, it's plug and play. On Windows, you need to install a driver. I selected the Helix Stadium XL as my audio device for my system and in my DAW. My studio monitors connect directly to the Helix Stadium XL. This gives me direct monitoring whether I'm just practicing, but especially when I'm recording. This means I don't monitor my guitar through the DAW, which can often be the cause of latency and poor feel. Direct monitoring ensures a natural feel when recording, delivering better performances. By default, any preset on the Helix will send a stereo signal to inputs 1 and 2 in your DAW, and input 7 will give you a DI signal from your guitar. This comes in handy if you want to reamp later, which I always do. More on that in a bit. But I take full advantage of the built-in amp models, cabs and effects, send-return loops for analog gear, mic input, and the routing capabilities of the Helix Stadium, which has proven to make this a highly functional and efficient recording hub. I'm just scratching the surface on the different concepts I'm sharing today about the Helix Stadium XL. If there's anything you'd like to see me do a deep dive on, or anything I haven't mentioned, just let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, we're just getting warmed up.
Yeah, it's pretty roasting back here. I'm sitting in a pool of my own juices.
Well, speaking of roasted, I have a new segment I introduced last episode where I dip into the comments and roast a viewer comment. Stick around, that's coming up a little bit later. Now, what I want to talk about now is, it's not just the pursuit of tone.
Oh, it is excellent to have a giant's tone, but it is tyrannous to use it like a guitar god.
Huh?
It's about communication, how we interact with our devices. Now, the original Helix was on the market for about 10 years before they introduced the Helix Stadium. Technologies emerged over those 10 years, and one of those was more affordable touchscreens. So, of course, Line 6 wanted to implement a touchscreen into the Helix Stadium, but I love what they did. It wasn't just taking something familiar and just slapping a touchscreen in there. They took it a step further that I think really enhances the ability to communicate with the device. Not to overlook things like the updated Agora amp models and beefed up DSP, as these are major upgrades, but I love how Line 6 took the addition of a touchscreen a step further. The familiar interface is a welcome strategy for seasoned Helix users, and the addition of the touchscreen makes it easier to navigate the device and build presets. This in itself would have satisfied many players, but the focus feature is a new way to communicate with the device. This really pays dividends in any scenario where you've got your hands full, which is almost all of the time for guitar players. But while recording with a guitar in one hand and a mouse in the other, I found this feature invaluable when building tones and presets. I could rely on my ear more by simply dragging my finger around the screen when dialing in tones with the different amp models, pedals, or even effects, while simultaneously interacting with the DAW. This was a great way to build tones that fit the track, and of course I could still tweak as required afterwards. And I especially like this feature when setting mic positions with the Helix cabs. It is a more natural way to search for the sweet spots that relies more on what you hear and less on what you see. All right, I think we're building up to something really good here.
I don't know, dude. I think you might be drinking the hype Kool-Aid.
Well, it might seem like that, but the truth is, as a guitar player and my fellow guitar players, you know how it feels. There's a sound that you have in your head that you're trying to get out, but I often struggle whether or not I've discovered it, even though it might actually be there.
The course of true tone never did run smooth.
Anyways, I love recording real amps, but I embraced amp modelers mainly because of the signal routing capabilities, because it added functionality to my studio that I didn't have before. And the Helix Stadium XL sort of builds on what the original Helix was, with impressive internal routing capabilities, a lot of send effect loops that really opens up a lot of possibilities of bringing the analog world into a digital device. Now, amplifiers. One of the gems in my collection is this EVO TM50 Tom Monda signature. This is a 50-watt hand-wired all-tube amplifier. Absolutely love this amplifier. So what I've done is I've incorporated not only this amplifier, which is connected to an Angle 4x12 double XL. It's mic'd up, 2 microphones. It's running through a preamp. I was able to incorporate all of that into the Line 6 Helix Stadium XL, as well as blending in some Helix amp models as well. So why don't I show you a little jam that incorporates all of that, and then I'm going to talk about the reamping capabilities of the Helix Stadium XL. All right, that's what I'm talking about.
So you're admitting you're just a fanboy?
No, I'm talking about the flexibility. If I find a great tone that works off of the Helix Stadium, I use that. I can incorporate my amplifiers where necessary. I can blend the two together, and that really just opens up the tonal palette.
But tone is blind, and amps cannot see.
Anyways, let me break down how the whole reamping setup is working. This, without a doubt, is my favorite function of the Helix Stadium XL. The 4 send return loops allow me to connect multiple analog devices like my Warm Audio Neve style preamp that receives the 2 mics capturing my Angle 4x12 double XL, and a load box giving me immediate options when reamping. I generally record using a preset with a Helix amp model while simultaneously recording the DI onto another track. Once the arrangement of the song is complete, I then decide whether I want to keep what I initially recorded or replace it with something else. I can reamp and record with another Helix amp model. I have a dedicated video about that. I'll link that above and down in the description. But I can also reamp with real tube amps. I created a reamping preset that includes numerous scenarios. To reamp, I set the output of the DI track to output 7. The input on my reamping preset is set to USB 7.8. That is routed to sends 3.4. Send 3 on the Helix connects to the input of the amp I want to record. In this case, it is my EVO TM50. In lanes 2 and 3, I've set the inputs to return 3 and return 4 respectively. The two mics capturing my cab are connected to my preamp, and the line outs from the preamp are connected to returns 3 and 4 on the Helix. The outputs of these lanes are set to USB 3.4. In my DAW, I create one mono track for the first mic and set that to input 3, and a second mono track set to input 4 for the second mic. I hit record, and I'm now reamping my amp cab setup. I've also created different scenarios with snapshots where I add gain blocks, compression, EQ, reverb, and even a drive block in front of the amp, so I can easily customize the signal chain as required. I have a similar preset for recording with a load box with the second lane input set to return 1, which is connected to the output of a load box, and the preset contains different scenarios accessible through snapshots, much like the previous preset. The end result is that all of this gear remains connected to the Helix at once, and all of the necessary routing is handled by the Helix internally. And as I demonstrated with the track earlier, I can use real amps, Helix amp models, or blends of the two to create some unique tones effortlessly. If you want to see a dedicated video about this, let me know in the comments. If you're watching this in the future, I'll make sure to link that in the description. Hopefully I remember to do that. All right, are we ready to roast someone?
The world's largest breath mint manufacturers have come to a consensus that you've defeated them.
I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about viewer comments. All right, just before we get to the roasting segment, there's a couple other functions that are worth noting. The monitoring selector buttons right on the Helix Stadium lets you control the volume going to your main studio monitors, headphones, and another source connected to the line outs. This is a very handy feature in a recording scenario. And I'm also recording voiceovers with the Helix, like the one in this video. Hey there! Input gain and phantom power are accessible in the global settings, and I created a simple preset with a volume block and the LA Studio compressor that gives me perfect voiceovers every time. Except when I screw up, which is unfortunately often. All right, it's time to get roasted.
You're so fat.
No, I told you this is not about me.
Bow legs much?
Stop.
Those cankles.
Stop.
If that smell could talk.
Stop.
All right.
Anyways, we're dipping into the viewer comments in a segment that I like to call
Roasted on a Mountain.
Anyways, today I have a comment from Gibson2623. Yeah, I'm going to resist some shots at Gibson. I actually own a couple of Gibsons and I actually like them. But Gibson2623 left a comment on a recent video, my top 10 gear acquisitions of 2025, of which the Helix Stadium ranked pretty high on that list. If you want to check it out, there'll be a link above my head here somewhere. Feel free to check it out. But Mr. Gibson2623 said, that Helix doesn't cut it, neither the previous one. Well, Mr. Gibson2623, what doesn't cut it is your spelling and your grammar. So I really have to question your ability to judge a good tone, but I will give you the benefit of the doubt. Now, from your perspective, in your parents' basement, drinking their orange juice and eating their chocolate chip cookies, I wonder what constitutes a good tone in your eyes. I'm waiting. All right, so if you have anything to say about that, I'm gonna post that on my community tab. If you wanna help a brother out and roast that guy back for me, I'd really appreciate that, either in the comments here or on the community tab. If you have something to say on any video, just be prepared. If you cross that line, you too may be
Roasted on a Mountain.
I've seen a better roast during a famine.
All right, I don't want to hear from you anymore.
Okay, I'm out, dude.
Catch you in the next one.
We'll see which way the wind blows. Actually, this show kind of blows.
Anyways, I want to put a bow on my thoughts here after using the Helix Stadium XL for the last 60 days, and I can sort of summarize that in a couple of points. Number one, I love that it still feels like a Helix. There's a lot of upgrades here, there's more power here, more functionality, but it still feels like we're in that Helix ecosystem. Now I've got the old device here. They've made it considerably smaller, but it's still not the smallest device out there, and I actually kind of appreciate that. If you look at the Neural DSP Quad Cortex, that's their flagship device, and it's a lot smaller. Now, Line 6's philosophy is to have different devices at different sizes, and their flagship device is still larger than I think the average amp modeler these days. But I appreciate that because that gives us a lot of signal routing capabilities, a lot of those hardware features that just there's no room for that on a smaller device. So I appreciate that that's available. If you want something smaller, obviously they've got the Stadium, and historically things like LT and Stomp. It's conceivable that we will see those form factors perhaps in the coming years. But I appreciate that there still is that larger flagship device, albeit quite a bit smaller than the original one, but somehow they've packed everything in here. And really, another really big one for me is the ease of use. Helix has always been very easy to use, but it doesn't compromise functionality. I haven't even talked about the desktop app is because I've actually been using this like right on board. There is a companion app as there are with other devices. Now, for example, with the FM9, 99% of the time I find myself using the desktop app because it's kind of confusing to use functionality right on board. But virtually, I think the entire time I've been using the Helix, I've been actually using it right on board here. And I think that bodes well for a great live device. It's just easy to do all the things you need to do. I'd argue some of the routing that I do in the studio would be more complex than what the average player would do live. Yet I was able to do everything I needed to do right on board. And I think that says a lot about the power and the ease of use of this device. And I really appreciate that. One less application to worry about. And again, if you want to shift to a live environment, well, you can feel comfortable that you can do everything you need to do. And lastly, I want to talk about the value because that's something that is important with everything. I mean, if you look at the price tag of this device, some will argue that it's not cheap, but if you are setting up a home studio, and this is my perspective here, if you think of all the things that you would need to buy, audio interface, some pedals, some amps, assuming you already have a computer, and some speaker monitors, but all of the things that you would need to buy if you were just getting started will cost you a lot more than a higher priced guitar amp modeler like this, because you're going to get the audio interface with the ability to do all that reamping, the signal routing, the effects, pedals, amps, speakers, and all of those things. So it's something certainly to consider. When I converted to using these things as an audio interface a couple years ago, I honestly haven't looked back. It's just an exceptional way to record guitar, bass, and things like that. Now, not everything is perfect. I did have a couple things on my short list when the Helix Stadium was just a gleam in someone's eye. One thing is, now, I do appreciate that there's a mic preamp built in. That's something like other devices don't have. I had hoped that maybe they would consider putting a second one, since I think a lot more people are using these as audio interfaces. And it would have been nice to have a second one when I'm recording my guitar cab, for example. I'm using a minimum of 2 mics. Now, I've sort of got around that problem because I do have an external preamp. So really, there is no problem. It would have been nice to have, but certainly it's still a bonus to have that built in. And one thing which I feel is a bit of an oversight is the lack of balanced inputs. I'm actually not sure why they wouldn't have done that, because again, in a recording context, having balanced inputs, especially when you're recording things like guitar amps and external pedals and things like that. Okay, if you're on short runs, it doesn't really matter that much, but if you have longer runs, having balanced inputs could mitigate some noise. But again, I have an external preamp now, so that's my workaround, and this is something I wanted in my studio anyways. But I do think that was maybe the one big oversight. Would have been nice to have some balanced inputs on the device, but really, that's the only complaint that I have. But it's not something that I can't work around. But other than that, I've really, really enjoyed using this device, and I look forward to more. I've got lots more content coming. So if you have any questions on anything that you saw here in this video, anything you'd like to see, a deeper dive into some of the concepts, just ask away in the comments. Always happy to hear from you. But I must send out a big, big thank you to Yamaha Canada for supplying the Helix Stadium for this video. Really appreciate that. I've got their information in the description if you want to check out more on Yamaha Canada, but big, big thank you to those guys. But anyways, if you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. And while you're down there, well, Helix Stadium XL, I've got a ton of content coming out. I've got one sitting here on screen if you want to check it out. And remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll, and I'll catch you in the next one.